what led you to switch from private practice to joining JDC?
I did get the chance to work on a pro bono case with one of the partners at my firm. It was for a client named B, and she was in prison serving a life sentence for killing her abusive husband. She had left him, and which enraged him, and he had been calling her and threatening her, and a friend had given her a gun for her protection. And she was leaving her home or work one day, and he showed up and he confronted her. She was trying to get away from him. He attacked her. He had a gun, and he actually put it to her head and pulled the trigger, and it just stuck and didn't fire. And she shot him. And she went to prison, and she had been in for over 15 years. The pro bono case involved taking a writ of habeas corpus, and we worked at it for a year and a half, 2 years, and it was reversed, and she came home. B has been home for about 11 years now. Right after she was released, actually, was asked to speak at the screening of a film. It was a documentary about someone that she had served in prison with. She told the audience that the 18 years that she spent in prison were just so bleak and dark, and that she had no hope. And the only times that she could see light was when her attorneys came to see her and to meet with her, and she knew that someone was helping her get a different result. And that, for me, I want to be on that side of making that happen.
Good afternoon, Gloria.
Hi, Charles.
For those who may not be familiar with your work yet, would you mind introducing yourself?
Sure. I am Gloria Chun. I work for the Justice and Diversity Center of the Bar Association of San Francisco. I am the Director of Pro Bono Legal Services, so I oversee a number of programs that provide free legal help to low-income people, as well as a lot of nonprofits that serve low-income communities.
And you've served in that role since 2017. How have you found that work so far?
Busy. It's lively. I love it. It is a lot of responsibility. It's very fulfilling work. I really deeply believe in the mission and purpose of our work. I knew it was a big responsibility when I took it on, but it's been almost 2 years, and I have realized that it's even more responsibility than I had realized, which is exciting, and it's an honor to do it, and it's always an adventure.
And what are some of the ways where the work has turned out differently than what you might have thought before you started in 2017?
One of the things is programmatic. We are really trying to expand the work that we do to help survivors of domestic violence. And so we've been fortunate enough to get some funding to grow our work in that area. So that is more work than I had anticipated taking on in terms of programs to manage and staff, just being able to hire. It is really great. And then I manage about 23 people now, and we have some open positions, so fully staffed. My team is about 26 people, and so that is a bigger duty and responsibility than I had anticipated. Those I think would be the main day-to-day ones.
Well, I just imagine that managing 23 staff members and when you're fully staffed, even larger, that you spend a lot of your work time in meetings, on calls with your staff, but also I know you spend a good deal of your time with external stakeholders. When you're spending that kind of time managing a staff so large, how do you carve out time for the other work you need to do, like thinking?
Yes. Funny that I have a door on my office now. I did not when I started as director. So we have open spaces at JDC, which meant that nobody had a door, including me, and my predecessors had not had a door. And we found some funding to build me a door, which has been really helpful, one, for just management. I can have conversations with my team that I could not have without a door,
right.
With privacy and confidentiality. And it also helps me set aside some time for myself for thinking. And so it was something that I did, and I had conflicted feelings about it. It felt a little bit, in a nonprofit, it felt non-egalitarian to be the one person who has a door on my team, but it helps me to actually carve out some time and think and strategize, and it helps a lot.
Seems like well worth the price of a door.
Yes, that door has paid for itself several times over.
The Bar Association of San Francisco and JDC kind of exist in a unique relationship, at least from my observation looking at many other bar organizations, even county bar organizations, where there is a kind of a collaborative role. And not just collaborative, JDC serves a large and important function reflecting a commitment to direct legal services that I really haven't observed in many other bar organizations. I was just wondering if you wouldn't mind, talking about that.
Sure. It is a unique and sometimes complicated relationship, but it allows the Bar Association and JDC really to cover a lot of ground that I don't know that other bar associations do. I don't know of very many that are that extensive. The structure is that the Bar Association of San Francisco is a nonprofit. It has a membership and charges membership dues. And then the Justice and Diversity Center is an independent 501c3 nonprofit. So we're a charitable organization, and we're affiliated with the Bar Association in some ways, as in we have one common executive director, one common chief financial officer, so a lot of the executive staff over both, and then people like myself and other directors of JDC are JDC employees, and we have the mission of providing free legal services. It just helps us do what we need to provide free legal services. Because JDC is a 501c3, we can take donations and contributions to fund our work, because we serve about 9,000 people a year now. We don't charge anyone a single penny. And so the structure that we have lets us do a lot of work. And then there's this very nice symbiotic relationship, I think, where a lot of lawyers who are Bar Association members, I think what's great about the San Francisco legal community is that people are really interested and passionate about giving back. And so a lot of Bar Association members are looking for ways to volunteer and do pro bono work. And JDC is right there with a lot of options. And it also helps JDC when we need to do outreach looking for volunteer attorneys, that there are Bar Association members that we can reach out to.
Well, I know from experience that that utilizing, it's one thing for attorneys to want to volunteer, but using volunteer attorneys effectively and efficiently is quite another thing. And so I know from experience that it actually takes a commitment and a belief that there's actually value in bar participation to do the work that way. I mean, in some respects, it might be easier and more efficient to, rather than have 500 volunteers, to have maybe 50 full-time staff do the work. Yep. Can you say something about that kind of that choice and that dedication to incorporating volunteerism into what JDC does?
That is a loaded question in the legal aid world. Yes, because there are a lot of legal aid nonprofits that are entirely staff-driven, direct representation. JDC is unique in that at this point, I think, we started out as pro bono legal services, and I think 40 years ago we were an outlet for Bar Association attorneys to volunteer, and it was entirely a pro bono program. At this point, about half of my programs are run by volunteers and half are staff-based, directly representing clients. And it's evolved that way over the years. And I would not say that one is better than the other. I think, and it's true, there's a lot to do with recruiting and retaining volunteers. And there's this constant cycle that needs to happen of spreading the word of what we can do and getting people involved. And I can see the merit to an argument that 50 staff attorneys who are expert and trained in what they do could do more work than 500 attorneys. I wouldn't say that that's the way to go. I think there really is a lot of value in pro bono. I do think it allows us to be exponentially more impactful than we could be on our own. One of the things I love about my job is that I think the people who want to be in legal aid and the people who want to volunteer for legal aid just kind of are the self-selecting group of people who are really kind of looking to do something. And I've seen people just give in extraordinary ways that you wouldn't anticipate or foresee or plan on. I think there's definite value in pro bono, and honestly, I think it really means something to lawyers who volunteer and gives them this fulfillment. I used to be in litigation. I spent 10 years in litigation before JDC, and I worked on some pro bono cases that added really a lot of meaning to my daily life. And so I wouldn't ever say, oh no, we need to just be staff attorneys only, and that it's more valuable than pro bono attorneys.
Well, I mean, it's a remarkable commitment. And as far as I can tell, unique. I have not actually seen this arrangement before.
I haven't either.
Yeah. Well, I commend you all for pursuing that work, because I think when you started in 2017, JDC was able to serve about 6,500 clients a year, and even in this less than 2-year time, you've now expanded to 9,000. I mean, that's a 2,500 client increase. That is substantial.
I can't take credit for that. It's actually JDC in its entirety serves 9,000 clients a year, which is my programs, and then there's also the Homeless Advocacy Project. And then in 2017 is when we added immigration. So immigration had been a small program under the Bar Association, and then with the political climate and changes in 2017, we brought that program into JDC as well. So JDC as a whole serves 9,000 clients between all three of our programs, and then pro bono legal services, of which I'm director, serves about 6,500. Yeah, so I've increased the number of clients that we serve who are survivors of domestic violence with our new programs, and we're especially focusing on clients who primarily speak Spanish or Chinese and trying to do more outreach. But that's been in the last year and a half or so. Yeah.
The Bay Area and San Francisco in particular is I'm not sure what the opposite of a desert is, but it's kind of a rainforest of bar associations.
Yes.
Many dozens of bar associations exist within a small square mile footprint. There are so many specialty and affinity bar associations. What's the best way for the bar associations that are not BASF to work with JDC and what the services that you all deliver?
I'm so glad you asked, because I would like JDC to be closer and more collaborative with other bar associations than we have been. I quite honestly, it can be a little bit overwhelming thinking about how to reach out to so many different bar associations. In the last year and a half, I have tried to be a little more involved with the Minority Bar Coalition. I'm less involved than I'd like to be, just I think because of time constraints. But I've gone to one of the main meetings during the road show that Malcolm Heineke and I were doing last year. I think the best way would be kind of inefficient, but just getting in touch with me. And we have a pro bono manager, Jay Lee, and he is also really interested in collaborating and partnering with minority bar associations. And otherwise, I don't know. Just come to me. I want to know them. So yeah.
Be careful what you ask for.
No, bring it on. Bring it on.
So you probably have enough perspective on the Bay Area to know how much it's changed in kind of in substance and in feel over the past 2 decades. Yeah,
it has changed a lot. I honestly don't know if it's a hospitable place to do what my parents did, to come here from another country with no money and no education and no roots and make a living and make do, which is what they did when I was a kid. I don't know if that's possible for newcomers now. It's changed a lot. It's so expensive, and and even just in the last 10 years, it's changed a lot.
And I would imagine, as an organization and as a supervisor that manages a large team of staff, attorneys, and otherwise in a nonprofit environment, that has to be a challenge, right, for a nonprofit employee to survive and thrive in San Francisco and the Bay Area. It's no easy feat.
It's really not. And staff has to live further and further out to find affordable housing, and then spend a long time commuting at a nonprofit salary scale, which kind of has a disproportionate effect on your income and what you take home. And it makes it very, very hard to hire. It took us 8 months to hire an attorney that we hired last month. Yeah, it's really rough.
Yeah, people have to have a love for the work.
Yes, or a wealthy spouse. Is sometimes
that's
how
the other
it
way.
Feels like.
Yeah.
And that's actually, it's really, we talk about this, executives at nonprofits talk about this, about how much it hurts diversity within your staff. And you really want to keep an eye on diversity and equity and inclusion in hiring, but you feel like you can't do it because you're really relying on hiring people who are in a situation where they're not going to be the primary income earner with the salary at JDC, which then you're skewing towards people who are already kind of middle class, upper income background, and it makes it very hard to hire people of minority backgrounds like myself. I don't have family support. All my student loans are in my name, and I don't have a cushion to pad the work that I do at JDC, and I consider it really a privilege that I've been able to make it work. But I understand that a lot of people can't, and it does make it hard to diversify the staff and then management and leadership.
Gloria, I know that before you came to JDC, you were in private practice. What was it about your work or your, what led you to switch from private practice to joining JDC?
I was in litigation for 10 years, complex civil litigation, and I was focusing on kind of complex law in motion, trial motions, and appellate practice, which I loved. But I did get the chance to work on a pro bono case with one of the partners at my firm. And it was for a client named B, and she was in prison serving a life sentence for killing her abusive husband. And B is an amazing woman, and she had really had a very, very hard, traumatic childhood and adulthood, and a lot of abusive relationships, including her own family when she was younger, and she had really turned around a lot in her life. She had overcome substance abuse and been a peer counselor. And then at the age of 40, found herself in an abusive relationship. She had killed her ex-husband. She had left him, which enraged him, and he had been calling her and threatening her. And a friend had given her a gun for her protection. And she was leaving her home or work one day, and he showed up and he confronted her at work. And she was trying to get away from him. And what happened was, he attacked her. He had a gun, and he actually put it to her head and pulled the trigger, and it just stuck and didn't fire. And she shot him, and she went to prison, and she had been in for over 15 years. And she came up for parole, or she had been denied parole a number of times, and then she actually was granted parole. But the governor of California has the authority to overturn parole grants, and Governor Schwarzenegger at the time overruled it. So the pro bono case involved taking a writ of habeas corpus, and we worked at it for a year and a half, 2 years, and it was reversed, and she came home. B has been home for about 11 years now. She is an Oakland native, so she's just over in the East Bay. I hear from her once in a while, and I became a lawyer because I wanted to help people. I had wanted to go into public interest law right out of law school. I couldn't afford it with debt and credit cards, and I'd put myself through school with loans and credit cards, and I couldn't repay that on a public interest salary. So, but it had always been in my heart that I wanted to be in public interest. And after B's case, I thought that I wanted to try public interest in legal aid, and I really liked the idea of coming to Justice and Diversity Center and supporting pro bono work full time. And I thought I would give it a try, and who knows, if I hate it or I just can't deal, I would go back. But it's been 6 years. I'm still here.
Wow. Can you identify a moment where that experience with B or some of the other pro bono work that you did may have helped you make that leap from private practice to public interest?
Yes. At some point in B's case, it just dawned on me, one, B couldn't do this without a lawyer. I mean, just the motion work and the petitions, you can't, it's not just that you need a lawyer, you need a dedicated, fierce lawyer, someone who's not just going to take your case and dial it in, but someone who's really going to fight for you. And also, B, right after she was released, actually, was asked to speak at the screening of a film. It was a documentary about someone that she had served in prison with, and she agreed to speak. And she told the audience that the 18 years that she spent in prison were just so bleak and dark, and that she had no hope. And the only times that she could see light was when her attorneys came to see her and to meet with her, and she knew that someone was helping her get a different result. And that, for me, I want to be on that side of making that happen.
Do you remember what her reaction was when she heard the good news?
I wasn't there. They actually they tell her at the prison, and then they won't even tell us when she'll be released. And they don't tell other inmates because they don't want other inmates to jeopardize her chances of getting out. I guess there actually are instances where other inmates will get jealous and sabotage someone who's about to be released. So I wasn't there when they told her. I wasn't even there when she came home because they gave no word to anyone. They just brought her. But I did see her the very next day. I saw her the day after she came home.
What was that like?
It was amazing. It was amazing and heartbreaking. I had lunch with B and her 4 daughters. And at the time, my law firm was at Jack London Square. And these 4 women had been born and raised in Oakland. They'd never been to Jack London Square. So they were really excited at being at Jack London Square. It was heartbreaking because one of her daughters told me that the night before, B had taken her socks off and filled the bathroom sink with water to wash her socks to wear the next day. Mm-hmm. And they told her, "Mom, we have a washing machine." So to see someone who had been locked away and kept really isolated from her daughters, and her daughters grew up without their mom, and to see the 5 of them out for lunch in Jack London Square, which would not be a big deal to a lot of people, was joyous and crushing.
Well, crushing because they lost over a decade with their mother.
Yes. They lost 15 years or 18 years with their mother.
I have to imagine that one of that an attorney who goes into direct legal services work does so because, as you say, you believe so much in that mission, and you connect with that moment where you're able to do the good work such that it's worthwhile to do the very, very difficult work that led up to that moment. But I can imagine, kind of given the volume of direct legal services, you said that JDC as a whole serves 9,000 clients a year, that sometimes one might be disconnected from one's clients and the good one does in life through their work. How do you and your teammates keep that sense of connection that might make it worthwhile for you?
Yes, it's hard. It's hard, and that is one of the things I've learned in the last 2 years or so as the director, is that it takes proactive measures to help us all keep doing the work, and also learning to be tuned in to when someone might be disconnecting or just really getting down. It takes, we have a staff support group, and it takes learning about things that I would have maybe rolled my eyes at before, terms like vicarious trauma, and it's because it's real. And it takes also really knowing yourself, knowing your limits, when it's getting to be too much, and then what you need to replenish. And it's different for everyone. So it really takes understanding yourself and recognizing the nature of the work that we do, and deliberately building a team that is not just motivated and focused on the work, but specifically people who are fun-loving, supportive, empathetic, and respectful of themselves as well as clients and colleagues. And then we're all pretty open. I'm really glad that we're open with each other, and we can actually turn to each other and say, I just got off a phone call that was really tough. And we find ways to pick each other up a little bit when we can. Yeah.
Well, I've gotten to know you over the past 2 years through service, through bar service, and I'm not sure. People experience people in different ways, but one thing I've grown to believe about you is that you're a very strong person, and that you know who you are. And who you are not. And that's just, I've never asked you that question or questions to lead to that conclusion, but that's just what my gut says. And what is it about your work and your background, your upbringing that leads you to, if it's true, that strength and that confidence?
First of all, thank you. Thank you so much. I think a lot of strength in knowing myself actually comes from my parents and my upbringing, which I think I hear the way my parents raised me is a little bit different from the typical Asian American experience. But this is all I know. And my dad especially always encouraged me to figure out what I want and what will make me happy. And I didn't realize, once I think I was in college before I realized this is kind of a deliberate thing that he's doing and is not standard for Asian American parents. I asked him about it, and we've talked about it since then. And he says that he made a conscious decision to raise his daughters, I have a sister, to take advantage of the options and opportunities that we have growing up here in the U.S. Because he made the decision to leave Korea and pick up and move to the U.S. And he thought that if he's going to make a momentous decision like that, then why do that and then live his life like he would in Korea and raise kids like he would in Korea? So he really because he chose to raise children in somewhere where he felt there would be more choices and options, he really wanted to encourage us to explore those choices and options. So, when it came time to pick a major in college, and I would ask him, what do you think I should do? And he said, well, what interests you? And what are the classes that you are enjoying? And which led to me double majoring in psychology and sociology, just because I was fascinated about people and what makes them tick. And so I think that being encouraged to pursue options and happiness has had a lot to do with that, as well as I finally got to an age where I was wise enough to see what an incredible privilege it is to have options and to pursue happiness. I mean, for my parents, it was just about survival, right? Putting food on the table, learning a language that they didn't know at all, establishing themselves in a community where they had no roots, and then all they could focus on was survival. And for them to say that I should pursue happiness and fulfillment is such a privilege that they didn't have, that I really feel that I should take advantage of that and explore. Some of it, I think, is just strength you just develop. I think I developed a lot of it as a young lawyer, as a young litigator, being whatever, I was 23 at the time, and being handed a motion for summary judgment and saying, hey, this motion is worth however many hundreds of thousands of dollars, go win it, and working really hard. I think I have some strength in, I've had some major setbacks in life, what I saw as setbacks at the time, because it wasn't where I thought I was going. And I think strength comes from having a setback / crisis, or going through really difficult things, and letting myself fall and kind of admit failure. I think that I'm a stronger person than I was for a while in my life, where I was just really wanting to pretend that everything was fine. And I think that when you let yourself admit that you made a mistake, and then see the way that people can support you when you admit that you made a mistake, friends and family step up in ways that you would not have imagined. I think that's strengthening.
Yeah, I know. I absolutely agree. Strength, in my mind, comes from weakness and failure. Yep,
and vulnerability. Mm-hmm. So I think just learning to be vulnerable, and then allowing that to open yourself to support, and then that also helps you understand how other people, what they're experiencing when they're down, and step up to help them. And that's just overall strengthening and growing. Yeah.
And how did your parents survive?
My mom, when we were younger, she babysat for neighbors so that she could be home and take care of us and other people's kids. My dad tried different things, kind of an office job. He tried to make a go of real estate for a while, but honestly, really just, they mostly worked for other Korean businesses. So, in Fremont, my mom worked for a Korean-owned company that manufactured computer parts. She worked the line in quality control. And my dad worked at a couple of Korean bookstores. They cleaned houses for a while. They really just did whatever they could. My dad is actually a pretty artistic person, so He tried to have a little graphic design business for a while, catering, to Korean businesses to create ads to put into those Korean newspapers in the Bay Area. And it didn't do very well because the clientele just didn't care about the design. So yeah, they worked just a variety of different jobs, really hard ones. And then their longest stretch was running a dry cleaner in Sacramento for maybe close to 10 years, 6 days a week, 12-hour days.
Not easy work.
No, really hard work. Yeah.
And you described the different outlook that your father expressed that he had, and he expressed it as a choice. And if he's going to move to a place where women have more options, that he wanted you and your sister to avail yourself of those options. What was it that led your parents to make that choice to move?
It was really just a pursuit of opportunity because they had both grown up in very poor families in Korea. And at the time, in the 70s, I think when they left, it was before the big economic growth in Korea. And it was still this, there was this sense that if you hadn't been born into education and money, that there would always be fewer options for you. And they both came from very poor families and hoped to have more opportunity for their kids. And then my dad's family all came together. He has 6 siblings. Take that back, 7 siblings. And it was a family vote.
Typical small Korean family at the time.
Yes. The normal mid-sized Korean family in the 70s. And they took a family vote, like my grandparents and my dad and my 7 aunts and uncles. And they said, it's all or nothing. We either all move to the States or we all stay. And apparently my grandfather was the last holdout. He didn't want to leave. And they told him, look, we'll all go together. And if you hate it, we'll all come back.
Wow.
Yeah. So they all came, and my dad actually came first. At the time, if you were in the U.S. Army, you could sponsor relatives to move. So he joined the U.S. Army and sponsored a lot of his siblings to then come over as well. And my mom just went with them.
Gloria, for students who might be thinking about going to law school, it's a real investment nowadays. Not just your time, but a huge amount of money. It's no easy feat to pass the California bar nowadays. What thoughts or advice would you give them about considering that path?
I would say don't do it without thinking long and hard, and a lot of research, including talking with as many people as you can. It is that huge of an investment. It's hard, and I really would say to think hard about why you want to go to law school, why you want to be a lawyer, or why you think you want to be a lawyer, and talk that through with people. And I recognize that not everyone has lawyers in their network to talk with. I didn't know any lawyers growing up. So reach out to your bar association, reach out to your local minority bar associations, call Abba and Charles, ask them how to find me. I just consult with people who have gone through it and talk about why it is that you think you want to do it, and be really sure and get some experience. Don't go straight from school. Get some experience in the legal field.
You've had at least a couple different practice settings that I know of, complex litigation, then also the work that you do for JDC, direct legal services, and the supervision of direct legal services. How is that work different than what you thought it might be?
Yeah. Litigation was different than I thought it might be. I was pretty naive going into it. Again, I had no frame of reference. I did not grow up with lawyers in my family or, family friends. I kind of naively went into it thinking, oh yeah, you'll do your job. I will research and write motions and go to court. And I wasn't prepared for the real life work setting, the politics of it, the, quite frankly, chauvinism of law firms at times. And I wasn't ready for that. It took me a while to figure out how to build a career and be successful and make a name for myself being myself. I think the tendency, at least for me as a brand new lawyer, was, well, if the men at the firm are really highly regarded and they're successful and they're big and loud and brash, then clearly you're supposed to be loud and brash to succeed. But that's ridiculous. I'm not big, I'm not loud, I'm not brash. And having to find a way to be true to myself and be successful, and learning that, if you're in a courtroom and the person on the other side is big and loud and brash, it can work in my favor that I'm relatively quieter. It's a contrast. So I think I did not expect the work and effort it would take to create my own identity and persona as a litigator that I was comfortable with and felt like was true to myself. In legal services, I did not anticipate how much that can feel like there's competitiveness in politics amongst legal aid nonprofits. And in hindsight, it makes sense. There's limited funding, there's limited volunteer bodies, and I just hadn't anticipated that, and that has surprised me and been unexpected.
For newly minted attorneys, let's say the student is one of the few that passed the California bar nowadays, and so you're in a law firm or you're in a practice setting. The first, I have to imagine one's head might be swimming because you're adjusting to the culture, you're adjusting to work life, you're adjusting to billing if you're in private practice. But for a young attorney, I think that climbing that competence slope is steep.
Yes.
Any advice that you can give for young attorneys on how best to navigate those first few years?
You're not going to get much sleep. Do what it takes. It is a steep learning curve. And it is really those first few years where you are pretty much required to prove yourself. And if you're in that situation, then do what it takes. Put in the hours that are necessary to learn how to do your work, and then learn how to do it well, and establish yourself as smart and capable and a good lawyer. I suggest keeping instant oatmeal in your desk drawer because it's fast and it's easy to eat. And when you're sitting there at work at 5 a.m., it's something that you can just grab and it'll keep you going. It's not glamorous. It's not easy. It does pay off later. Not necessarily, in knowledge and expertise and perhaps financially, it's payoff. You just have to, you have to put in that time and effort to learn. There's no shortcut that I know of.
Well, and let me ask you a question that I know is unfair, and you can choose whether to answer it or not. But what makes for a meaningful life?
Love, given and received from family, friends, close ones. Just a real, genuine respect and love for the people who are meaningful in your life. Art, whatever it means to someone individually, just some pursuit of something that's artistic or beautiful or aesthetically pleasing to you. Learning, constant learning. You'll notice that I'm not talking about work at all. Work is a necessity, but to the extent that you can be doing work that is meaningful to you, whatever that is, that helps tremendously build a meaningful life. But beyond work, really having genuine love and respect in your life, learning, growing, some sort of artistic value, whether you're making it, just looking at it, and making mistakes. And learning how to admit your mistakes and learn and grow from them. And I don't know if am I missing anything? That might be it. But I mean, that's not it, but that's that's what I can think of off the top of my head in response to an unfair question.
All right. Thank you very much, Gloria.
Thank you, Charles.